Assalamu alaikum and good noon. Distinguished guests, respected dignitaries from home and abroad, esteemed panelists, members of the press, and dear audience, a very warm welcome to you all. Today, we are honored to gather here at the Bengal Delta Conference, the seminar on Rohingya Refugee Crisis, Regional Security Risk, Repatriation Pathway and Livelihood Challenges. We are truly privileged to have among us distinguished speakers and discussants, Ms. Shama Ubaed, Organizing Secretary, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, BNP, our respected Professor Dr. Niaz Ahmed, Honorable Vice Chairman, Vice Chancellor, University of Dhaka, and respected Ambassador M.A. Karim and Michael Coleman, Senior Fellow, Asia Pacific Foundation, and Dr. Faheem Hussain, Assistant Professor, School for the Future Innovation in Society, Arizona State University, USA. We are also honored by the presence of the Professor Dr. A.N.M. Mishkatuddin, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Shaheen Hasnat, Vice President, alongside other respected scholars, journalists, and distinguished members of the audience. Now, I would like to invite today's seminar moderator, Dr. Emadul Islam, Fulbright scholar, to kindly accompany the stage and be seated. Dr. Emadul Islam. Ladies and gentlemen, today's seminar will be moderated by a brilliant Fulbright scholar, internationally renowned researcher, a senior fellow of Sasakawa Peace Foundation, Japan, Dr. Emadul Islam. Let us welcome him with a round of applause.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much, Dr. Siddique, for your very nice introductions. On behalf of Sasakawa Peace Foundation, Japan, I must say thank you to all for joining this very important seminar, Rohingya Refugee Crisis, Regional Security Risks, Repatriation Pathways, and Livelihood Challenges. I must say thank you to daira for giving us opportunity for a partnerships to host this event. This is very, very important. As I recalled, a started speech by our foreign advisor. He quoted that one of the biggest problems in our time, this is the Rohingya refugee crisis. And why this is biggest problem? Today, when we are talking about this issue, the 1.5 billion populations, they fled from actually Myanmar, and their life is totally uncertain. And it's also called our crisis, it's called the regional crisis, and also it's called the global security crisis. As I talked at the very beginning, this is our biggest problem, not only for the Bangladesh, it's also in the global arena. But this problem has been started at the very beginning of our independence in 1977. But it has very historical timeline. But it is totally accelerated in the 2017 when 1.5 million already actually fled from Myanmar to here. And also, even when I'm talking today, at least another 150,000 is last couple of months, they again came to Bangladesh from actually Myanmar. So this problem is very huge. When you're talking about this crisis, after 2017, it started with again COVID-19, and again is the health risks in the different time paradigm, and also in the 2023, almost 70% of the ration is actually cut off from humanitarian budget. And today in 2024-25, because of some political unrest in Myanmar, we know that there is some group adjacent to our border that make it actually very difficult security risks for Bangladesh. So with these things, we must say thank you to our current interim government, the Nobel laureate Professor Muhammad Yunus. He tried to convince the international community to make this priority again, even though there are many crises in the world current of days. So in 13 September, that means next month, the United Nations General Assembly will host a very high-level event on September 13th that focus on Rohingya refugee crisis and the Myanmar Muslims. So this program, we actually thinking that it is our curtain raiser program. So we will try to, for this scholarly discussion that our esteemed panelists today, after that we will prepare a policy brief and we would like to hand over it to UN General Assembly, the President, in 13 September 2025. With this discussion, we tried to focus on some of the very important issues, what immediate diplomatic and legal steps are needed to advance repatriations, and also how can regional actors like Bangladesh, ASEAN, and Japan, India, China, cooperation more effectively on durable solutions. Without further delay, may I request very distinguished ambassador, so Ambassador Richard Tariq Karim, for his speech to cover on some of very important issues under the questions like the Rohingya refugee crisis is no longer confined in Myanmar and Bangladesh, but has wider regional political risks. From his perspective, how can regional cooperation frameworks such as BIMSTEC or ASEAN be mobilized more effectively to mitigate these emerging non-traditional security threats for Bangladesh? So may I request Ambassador Tariq Karim sir for his remarks on these particular questions for within 5 minutes. Sir.
We cannot try and solve anything in isolation from history. I think the previous panel discussion, which I was listening to, everything rotates around identity, identity formation, and the history behind that formation, which creates the rifts between one identity and the other or others. And in a sense, this is where we are stuck. We are stuck in a point of history which has not moved forward after the crisis the seeds of the crisis had been sown. We cannot set back history. We cannot roll it back, but history has a way of coming forward and engulfing us in its processes. And in a sense, we find ourselves prisoners of that history. If we look back in the late 40s, just prior to independence or partition, the Arakanis were part of the Bengal presidency. In fact, British rule over India through the Bengal presidency extended into Arakan and through there to Penang and Singapore. Arakani's leadership, largely Muslim at that time, had entreated that they wanted to remain part of Bengal because there were links, business links, family links, other links, commercial links, historical links there. Their identity had evolved from that. Unfortunately, nobody at that time had time for them or patience with them. We would not have been facing this problem today if somebody had listened at that time and accommodated that. Having said that, now the crisis has erupted post-1948 or 49, when the identity politics within Myanmar also started surfacing. The identity politics within Bangladesh and what was the whole of Indian subcontinent had already exploded and resulted in something. The consequence, or maybe something triggered off by that, also triggered off a process within Myanmar. And the othering of the Rohingyas started with the majority Myanmar community. Myanmar community were Buddhists. They follow a form of Buddhism which is somewhat extremist in view. The same sect also is in Sri Lanka. These Buddhists, unlike our perception of Buddhism, tends to have a militant side to it. And that Buddhist teaching at that time to hold was, beware of the invasion from the Muslims in the West. That is still deep-rooted. Now, let's tackle the question of identity. The Rohingyas have an identity. They have an identity which goes back not just to, as the Myanmar government is saying, to partition and the British pushing people across. British have used social engineering and in the larger rubric of their economic and industrial engineering, but taking people from one part of the colony to another part of the colony, maybe near or far away, settling them there. So they took people to South Africa, to East Africa, to East Asia, to the Gulf countries, to Eden. But we do not see this sort of identity clash in most of those parts as we are seeing in Myanmar. And that is mainly the main reason we have to address. The Myanmaris say these are foreigners. We have to address that question and give them historical facts and everything to say they are not foreigners. I don't think in our diplomacy we have really focused on that, except saying, no, they have been there for a long time. Now, this is not going to go away. This is going to become worse. Again, in recent history, post-49, it's not 2017 that the crisis burst. This has been happening for the previous 30 years. What lessons would we learn? We were able to resolve the issue partly in those days. They took back about 70% of the refugees who had come. Some remained behind, some settled. This was the largest, almost 50 or more than 50% of the entire Rohingya population was pushed out in one shout. And I think the Myanmar government was very astute. It recognized that the Bangladesh government was in a weakened situation. It was too preoccupied. It was trying to stabilize itself internally. So this was the time you pushed them through. The agreement signed in 2017, when I saw it, I didn't see the text of the agreement, but what was given out in public, it horrified me. It actually, we gave away whatever bargaining position that we had. I asked somebody in the government at that time, how do you expect this agreement to work? And I was told that, the foreign minister we signed it with, he's an old friend, we have worked together, he has given me his word. International relations does not work on that friendship. International relations and bilateral interstate relations works on each state establishing its own interest. And I said, well, I will eat my hat if even 10 refugees are repatriated within the first 100 days, which is what he was claiming. It's way beyond 100 days. It's now gone on almost 8 years. And I wager no more will come. In the last couple of years, I think we have had an influx of another 1 million, and they will keep coming. The problem is not the refugees per se, the problem is in Myanmar. The refugees, we should have learned by now from earlier refugee crises and populations, a new one happening now, elsewhere in the world. Refugees crammed together in one space is like shutting the lid of a pressure cooker, blocking the safety valves, and turning up the fire. That is what is going to happen in the refugee. This is the largest, most densely packed concentration of refugees in one refugee camp anywhere in the world. Bangladesh doesn't have the luxury of space. And so by now, I think we have probably 1.5 million, if not more, refugees crammed in there. It's also, initially Bangladeshis typically with generosity welcome the refugees. I think they remembered that they themselves started the journey as a nation with being refugees, large number of refugees in another neighboring state. So, yes, there was the affinity that these are people being thrown out by a murderous regime, we must welcome them. But that welcome has worn off now. There will be clashes between elements in the refugee camps and with the indigenous populations. That is bound to happen. After all, it's a question of livelihoods, it's a question of being able to survive, it's a question of access to resources. There will be conflicts happening in all of these areas. How do we resolve it? Livelihood is number one. If you keep so many packed in one space, you are going to create tensions and there will be explosions. And sometimes explosions have been happening. Quite a few years ago, I had mentioned that the best way is to disperse them, not keep them in one place. And that one place has other implications. When it was decided to set up the camp there, probably the calculation or miscalculation was, they are here, we will again be able to talk to Myanmar, they will go back in a year or two. It was not taken into consideration that that is a very eco-fragile area of the Chittagong Hill Tracts. More than the habitat, the vegetation, it stops the elephant passage from Myanmar to Bangladesh. There's a regular passage of elephants going. So now there is evidence coming every day of human and elephant conflicts. Because elephants don't have food there, they come in, they go into the villages, they ravage it. So that is creating another area of conflict. Thirdly, the refugees have to be given skills to become productive. Perhaps they can be productive and help Bangladesh economy, but I don't think we have thought along those lines. Dispersing them would mean that we are able to perhaps better monitor and control them and the illicit activities that happens within this one packed camp. Of course, it means that our government will have to have security measures and other measures in the other places. They set up 10 different camps with 100,000 people. You have to have that also. But it's investment worth the making. And the long-term interest is that if we insist on saying that these refugees are going to go back, that we must equip them to go back in a manner in which they are productive and contribute to the development and growth of their own state, which is their state to begin with, from which they have been driven out. Diplomatic efforts, all our efforts so far, I'm afraid, have not been of much avail. Within ASEAN, we have tried hard. I think individual members of ASEAN are sympathetic, particularly Malaysia and Indonesia. They also gave some shelter and refuge in the early years, but that's also died down. But ASEAN as a bloc will not actually move forward because the charter prohibits them from taking critical action against any fellow member. I had advocated that can we explore the UN reviving its trusteeship council, because obviously it's Myanmar, the internal situation in which has to be stabilized, governance has to be restored. The trusteeship council, which was formed in the early years of the UN, still remains dormant. It remains hibernating. But it cannot be restored in the same way. Can we form that in the basis of regional countries interested in Myanmar and the resolution of this crisis? Which means get ASEAN, get India, Bangladesh, China, contribute troops, take over the governance of Myanmar. It has to be done forcibly because the Myanmar government is not going to go. And there is big power rivalry going, so one will not allow the other to happen. But if all of them are involved, perhaps there might be one way where they will come to a wire media when trying to restore stability and peace within Myanmar, when they can also offer the hope of the refugees going back to their own homeland and being productive there. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for his very detailed articulation of this problem of Rohingya refugee crisis and what we can do now. So, without further delay, may I request Dr. Faheem Hussain. He's an assistant professor, School of Future Innovations at Arizona State University. May I request for your remarks? Actually, there were some communications dealing among the Rohingya refugee camps, even they are not very familiar to information technology, but there are some activists, they did very, very smartly. Mr. Hussain, working on Rohingya refugee issues since 8 years. So may I request to share his experience to work in this communication technology which used by Rohingya refugee, particularly young people. Sir, your time is very sharp, 5 minutes. We'll come out again for second questions, another 3 minutes. Sir, please.
Thank you so much, distinguished chair and my fellow speakers. It's actually the worst time to talk before lunch. So we are all hungry since the morning. There are so many good speeches going on, so I will try to be short. Before we go into the use of information and communication technology in the Rohingya refugee camp, we need to set up the context of how we're seeing things here. We are talking about almost a 2 million people strong city in the border of Myanmar and Bangladesh. That city does not have any kind of comfortable infrastructure. There's no electricity, there's no utility, water, or there are no formal mobile phone services. We are talking about a population which has been persecuted for decades. So I am from the School of Future of Innovation in Arizona State University. So for us, when we see human displacement, it's a present and a future problem. Worldwide, together right now, it's around 160 million people who are displaced. Every minute, there are 10 people who are getting displaced from their home and households. So in our own culture, when we talk about in this Bengal Delta conference, imagine that displacement is an ingrained part of our socio-political environment. We have the expression, "Panite bheshe asche," ba bane bheshe asche. So this internal displacement due to climate change, due to environmental disaster, is a part of our psyche. And then 1971 was there, we were internally displaced, and then also took shelter in the neighboring country. So this is important when we set up the Rohingya crisis. This is not a foreign thing. What makes me sad looking into the crisis is In Dhaka or even in Chittagong, we do not at all talk about it as if they do not exist. But that part of our country has become very vulnerable. So when we also talk about ICT, technology, and access for the Rohingya refugees, what we often do not talk about is the crisis of the host community there, the crisis of the citizens of Bangladesh in the Cox's Bazar region, the lack of education infrastructure, the vulnerability in terms of narco trafficking, and also human trafficking, and so many other things are there. So in such a backdrop, when I am especially talking to a very younger and motivated crowd, imagine this nation who does not have alphabets. Rohingyas do not have official alphabets. And they are not officially allowed to have mobile phones as their own. And the internet service in this wider camp is not that good, actually very bad. So how do you communicate, especially when you are persecuted? How do you communicate and thrive? How do you ensure the sense of belonging? How do you push your own culture and you thrive, not just survive? What we are seeing there is both sides of the coins. One is the tragedy. Lack of communication made sure that they are more vulnerable because they do not have valid SIM cards. They're always being harassed. They pay extra money for the access to phones. And lack of alphabets, meaning that they can only communicate through some foreign language, which they need to learn, but they're not allowed to. They're officially not allowed to learn Bangla in the camps, or they have to rely on audio-visual messaging. So in this day and age, imagine, especially post-July Revolution, where social media took a center stage. Imagine the problems and the challenges that this Rohingya young generation are going through. In terms of the demography, you also need to understand majority of the Rohingya population who are there, who are not actually officially designated as refugees. They are women and very young population, similar to the demography we see here or younger. So the crisis and the challenges of communication and aspirations are there. But then the other side, which really excites us from an innovation point of view, is the resilience and the local innovation to overcome such obstacles. They have their offline communication network. Their mobile charging stations are amazing hub of localized information. Imagine Rohingyas have also social media influencers. Social media influencers in a camp where they do not have access to legal internet. And they have localized content. And during COVID also, we have seen in their own language how they have communicated the health processes and the procedures provided by WHO. So in short, when I look into this as a researcher, of course, there are fascinating things to look into, especially on the human innovation side from a technology perspective. But at the same time, as a Bangladeshi, when I look into it, I see a huge tragedy unfolding. It's a ticking time bomb. Whatever we are seeing there right now is just the tip of the iceberg. So it's very important for us to have a better understanding and more conversation about it. What disheartens me is the word Rohingya became a racial slur in the colloquial of Bengali language in our present time. That's not acceptable. They are human beings, our fellow global citizens, and we are, as Bangladeshis, a very gracious host. So together, I think the conversation, when we talk about it, is very important to talk about the challenges of the host communities, and at the same time, work together with the Rohingya communities to provide them with sustainable ICT infrastructure so that they can communicate themselves and push their own agenda on their own terms. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Faheem, for articulations of your experience in the very practical ground. Now we would like to hear some perspectives from activist side. So we have very distinguished guest, Ms. Shama Ubaed, Organizing Secretary, Bangladesh Nationalist Party. So we would like to know for her perspective, the long-standing career to work as the biggest party in our Bangladesh, as an international perspective, what she thought, what immediate and diplomatic and legal steps are needed for advanced repatriations. So what we know that we, as a country, we would like to repatriation. There are no other solution for this Rohingya refugee people. But may I request Ms. Shama Ubaed for her remarks in 5 minutes.
Good afternoon all. Assalamu alaikum. First, I would like to thank the Bengal Delta Conference, the organizers, to bring up this issue, which is very pertinent not only for Bangladesh, but also for the international community and mostly, especially for the Rohingya refugees who we are talking about. It was almost forgotten. The issue was almost forgotten. I think I should thank the interim government to have a conference few days ago in Cox's Bazar to float this issue up in the international platform again. And this is something that Bangladesh has to live with. I think it, as my earlier speakers have already said, it's bad and it's going to get worse. As Bangladesh stands on a threshold of a historic change, if I may say so, a fresh look, an approach to the Rohingya crisis is necessary. It's important. We all know that it's an old problem. It has been going on for a while. We have had it in 1970s, in the 1990s. Throughout the history, Bangladesh Nationalist Party has dealt with the Rohingya crisis twice. During its tenure in the late 1970s, during President Zia Rahman's time, and again in the 90s. At that time, former Prime Minister Begum Khaleda Zia has dealt with the Rohingya crisis successfully. On both the occasions, our parties succeeded to create remarkable diplomatic pressure upon the Myanmar military regimes to repatriate the Rohingyas. But our chairperson also appealed similar pressure on the Myanmar when over 250,000 Rohingyas sought refuge in Bangladesh after a major crackdown in 1992. At that time, during BNP's time, we were able to, although the number was much smaller at that time, but we were able to have a tripartite agreement between Bangladesh, Myanmar, and United Nations. And we were able to make UN a major stakeholder in the partnership, in the agreement. And also, during that time, the Muslim countries had a major role to play to create pressure on the Myanmar army and the people who have created these atrocities. So now we are in a situation where the number is much, much bigger. We have complex geopolitical challenges here. The question is how we go towards a sustainable solution. To go towards a sustainable solution, we need to have this discussion on international platform every single day. Because there are humanitarian challenges, as we know. There are children, because of the funding crisis, the shortage of funding, the children are going out of education. The food is there's scarcity on their food. They are not getting enough nutrition. The female and the children are having, they are going through a much worse humanitarian situation than their counterparts. But also at the same time, we realize that repatriation without ensuring their safety, security, their citizenship, their dignity is no point of doing that. What we have seen that before, that we have tried to shift few thousand of them to Bhashanchar, which really doesn't help. We tried, to repatriate, have multiple dialogues with the Myanmar government, which did not help. So what we really need, that the international community should actually bring those people, the army, the Arakan army, and the people who are responsible for creating this historic, human rights violation. The international community, Bangladesh as a country, has a role to play to pressurize the international community so that these people are brought to justice. If we are not brought to justice, if they are not brought to justice, then the Rohingya population, they are not going to get their due dignity and their citizenship back. So that is what is very important. And as political, it's not only diplomacy, it's also politics. The international community, there has to be political will. Last few years, we have seen that the last government, who was thrown out last year, has used this Rohingya, of course Bangladesh has always been generous towards the refugees, whoever that may be. But whenever this Rohingya issue came up, the last Bangladesh government took the opportunity to take credit that Bangladesh is being very generous. But it is not the issue of Bangladesh's generosity. It's the issue of this huge population going back to their country, having proper education, proper health, proper nutrition, proper life. So if we need to ensure that, we need to have more substantial dialogue between China, India, the ASEAN countries, Japan, the European, the democracies that we feel that can play a more substantial role in this. Of course, the United Nations. So we need to, as a whole, the country needs to, all the political parties, not only BNP, the government, all the political parties, the stakeholders, the civil society need to have a more collaboration on this issue. And we also need to think out of the box, how we can educate the children now, how we can provide nutrition and food to the mothers and the children now, how we can provide jobs to them now. So that is something that there are two issues. One is the repatriation problem. Another issue is how to address their problems in the current present day. So BNP has always been proactively talking about it since 2017 when this started. And whether our help was asked for or not, we have always been vocal. We have been to Rohingya camps many times. We are willing to work ahead in the future with the international community, pressurize the international community to actually have a substantial sustainable solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shama Ubaed. So, as she rightfully articulated that we political parties needed consensus to solve this problem. So consensus we have needed from our community, our civil society organizations to reprioritize this issue for the international level to solve it. Without further delay, today I would like to introduce one of my friend and international very renowned scholar, Mr. Michael Kugelman. He's now serving as Asia Pacific Foundation's the Senior Research Fellow. May I request for his perspective, how can we Bangladeshis again reprioritize these Rohingya refugee crisis issues in international level? So as I mentioned earlier that for endeavor of our Honorable Chief Advisor, Nobel laureate Professor Muhammad Yunus, that he able to convince the international community again 106 countries give the permissions and make consensus that we should organize again the General Assembly one meeting. And this is going to held again in 13th September. So may I request again, so Michael Kugelman, for his perspective, as a country, Bangladesh, how can actually raise this issue for repatriations and sustainable solutions. Michael Kugelman, floor is yours.
Thank you very much to the Honorable Chair. It's really an honor for me to be a part of this critically important panel. So indeed, I'm an outside analyst, and I will provide a rough sense of how I look at this issue from the perspective of the international community, and how Bangladesh can try to appeal to the international community on this very important issue. So, I mean, the fundamental challenge for Bangladesh, as I see it, is this. When I talk to stakeholders in this country, including on the very highest level, the Rohingya issue is always discussed with superlatives, in the sense it's the biggest problem, the biggest challenge, the most serious challenge, the highest priority challenge, and yet outside of Bangladesh, to be very honest, most people have not even heard about this issue. I mean, of course, setting aside the exception of the international aid community, and of course the UN has been very engaged on this issue, but this is an issue, I would argue, that many are not even aware of. This is not an easy moment for humanitarian aid appeals. There are, first of all, so many, an unusually large number of humanitarian crises playing out in the world today. You could start with Gaza, you can go to Ukraine, and then of course you have so many others playing out in Africa, as well as in Afghanistan, many other places. So there's just so many crises to try to bring relief to. And then of course more recently, the new challenge is the Trump administration's aid policies, which includes of course suspending almost all foreign assistance and dismantling USAID. And of course, everyone here will know how significant of a role USAID has previously played in Bangladesh. And as I understand it, food assistance to the Rohingya from the US has been exempted from the aid suspension. It's unclear how long that exemption will last. But what I'm saying is that you have these two major challenges. One in the sense that you have so many crises, so many humanitarian crises playing out, and then these new challenges brought on by these major shifts in US assistance, which puts even more pressure on other top donors. There's just less to give around, so to speak. So, I think that Bangladesh in recent months has leveraged one of its best assets when it comes to trying to get the attention of the international community to this issue, and that is the chief advisor himself. I mean, he's someone who, for lack of a better term, he has star power in the international community. He's well respected abroad, and he has, of course, to his credit, used platforms like the UN and others to try to bring attention to the Rohingya issue. But to be quite candid, when he makes appeals for more assistance for the Rohingya community in Bangladesh, again, just a very difficult appeal to make now, given the pressures on international humanitarian assistance. So the other issue is that he has also called for other countries to open up their doors to take in some members of the Rohingya refugee community. But the current political moment, the global political moment is such that that's a really hard sell to make at this moment. So my modest proposition here is that when it comes to awareness campaigns meant to appeal to the international community, I think that it's important to link the issue, the plight of the Rohingya, to things beyond humanitarian concerns. I think it's important to link it to the broader geopolitical state of play in the region, as well as the security issues. And this includes, of course, the very unusual, if not unique, challenge that Bangladesh faces of there being a violent non-state actor in Myanmar that essentially controls the entire border with Bangladesh. I'm not sure if there's ever any other comparable case than that compared to what Bangladesh faces. Now, the danger here, which is very important to avoid, is that you don't want to securitize a humanitarian issue, because that could then invite the wrong types of policy interventions, which would not be helpful. So I think that the challenge for Bangladesh is to strike that middle ground, right, between linking this challenge to broader geopolitical and security issues that I think will get the world's attention, but without overstating that angle. Because you don't want to risk securitizing something that at the end of the day remains a humanitarian crisis. So I think the challenge is to find that middle ground. So with that, I'll conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your raising the point, because everybody in the nowadays we are facing another crisis when the US stopped the US aid. So development effort is under challenge. And it's also directly affect to our Rohingya refugee camps for their rationing and many other purposes. Thank you so much for raising these issues. Without further delay, may I request Professor Mohammad Niaz Ahmed Khan, Honorable Vice Chancellor, University of Dhaka, to talk about the issue of sustainable livelihood. So yes, this is true that we cannot think about their livelihood as a sustainable way, but is it also ground of humanitarian and also the justice that if people live any certain, at least one days in particular countries, they have the rights to live with minimum, basic needs. So as there are several arguments still there because of some difficulties happening in the Myanmar, so repatriation is still in the myth. So may I request Professor Mohammad Niaz Ahmed Khan for his long-standing work in the development field, what types of livelihood framework we can actually propose as for their justice concern. I called not just mentioning the sustainable livelihood framework like other model, but it's particularly for refugee one. So may I request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Niaz Ahmed Khan, for his remarks.
Salam and good afternoon, everyone. The reality is when you talk about Rohingya, especially the repatriation point, a degree of frustration sets in. We've been having this discussion since 1977 with no clear sign of resolution before us. That remains the reality. But then we cannot stop talking about it. The dialogue needs to go on, and that's where the significance of events like this lie. We have got three options, as you all know. The first, of course, is repatriation. Dismal situation. My very distinguished preceding speakers have pointed to various dimensions of the challenge that we face in terms of repatriation. The latest being introduction of the idea of a human corridor, basically a safe passage, and that has stirred up more questions than answers. ASEAN, as Ambassador Tariq Karim rightly pointed out, has been a pocket of hope for us. Other than that, in terms of repatriation, we are in a limbo. That's the reality. The second option is local integration. Of course, as a state, we are in a state of denial. We don't want to talk about it much. You don't get much even academic information on local integration. But the reality is that it is happening. It has been happening since the mid-70s, and integration remains a reality as of today. The state of denial, of course, doesn't allow us to get into a detailed academic, or for that matter, practical study of the actual situation. There is cultural proximity, language, institutions of civil marriages, you cannot deny. And these remain strong cultural, to some extent historical, tools of integration. So that's the second option, of which we know it's a reality, but we don't know the details. Third, which relates to the point that Dr. Ahmed has kindly suggested me to focus on, is resettlement. 1.2 million official figure, 32 camps, about 6,500 acres of area. If you add Bhashanchar, another about 35,000. That's the landscape we are talking about in terms of resettlement. What are we doing in terms of resettlement? Number one, we are trying to fulfill the basic human development requirement of education. From basic literacy to about level 9. And that's, of course, an international obligation that we have to do. So we're doing that. In terms of livelihood, we have got some typical programs. Some agricultural support that includes a bit of aquaculture, some basic skills development, including sewing machines, etc. These are meant to be providing basic survival means. So, training for survival. That's what we are talking about when we mention the term livelihood in terms of Rohingya resettlement. And there are two uncomfortable questions that we need to deal with. If we get them into full-scale education within our many limitations and get them into regular livelihood training, including a bit of vocational training, then ultimately we are paving the way for local integration. So how do you get that uncomfortable question dealt, especially at the state level, is something that we need to recognize, at least, if not talk about. The more we get into systematic livelihood and human development training and capacity, the better for them in terms of adjusting themselves to the local communities. And that will also raise serious discomfort among the host community. From our very limited exposure to those areas, we've been there for quite some time now. Even from our personal insights, we know that the tension between host communities and some concentration of the camps, not all camps, some camps. We actually have got a list, Kutupalong being number 1. The tension is increasing. So I don't have a quick fix solution to it. I'm just raising some fundamental issues. Adding to this complexity is the fact that funding is going down drastically. With the cut on USAID, it has served a severe blow in terms of resources. Let me give you just one quick statistics, and I'm going to stop there. In this year, 2025, just a rough estimation, camps would require at least, going by the most conservative statistics, 42 million USD. 1/3 has been promised, not delivered, promised. If Mr. Mizan would have been here, he could bear us out. 24 joint partners have been assigned, 13 actually on the ground. Now, we are talking about the livelihood related campaign and practice when I'm mentioning these figures. So the challenge is formidable. And we don't have any quick fix solutions to this. But we have at least 2 relatively hopeful factors on our side. Number 1, despite all odds, we have survived. The communities, both Rohingyas and the host, are known for their exceptional degree of resilience. So we will survive. Secondly, with Professor Yunus's personal image within the equation, we've been able to gain renewed international focus on this crisis. So 2 factors to be hopefully helping us. Rohingya crisis is known to be, we actually dubbed this as the most wicked problem of our time. And we need to continue this discussion, one form or the other. God bless.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes, we should continue these discussions. In this stage, may I request our all of panelists, everybody gets at least 1 minute for particularly the 1 questions. You can take a seat there and we'll use the microphone. It is about that what is your expectation from UN General Assembly meeting about a high-level special event about Rohingya refugee crisis and Myanmar Muslims people, particularly in the peaceful repatriations. Can start from you? In a 1 sentence, what do you expect actually? What is your expectations?
I'll be politically incorrect here, if I may. I'm not sure whether I'm videotaped here. I do not have much expectations from this from the meeting which is going to happen, because I've been following it for many years and nothing has been done. I do not see also the Rohingya voices in these dialogues, which is another thing, the lack of Rohingya leadership to be a part of the conversation as a stakeholder. And I will be an assigned pessimist in this whole conversation by saying that it's very pragmatic, it would be very pragmatic for us as a nation to plan for the long-term solution where they will be staying here, and we need to plan accordingly. And we need to see the case studies of Lebanon, Jordan, Uganda, Kenya, Malawi. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, interestingly, the countries which are not economically developed are the most gracious hosts, and they have figured out the way to integrate the refugee communities. I think we should do that. So I'm not that optimist. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The same question to Ms. Shama Ubaed, please.
Well, Bangladesh has been generous enough, but I think the international community, I don't want to be so pessimistic like my, my previous speaker, but the thing is that I think the main stakeholders has to be on the table. In our neighborhood, the Chinese, the Indians, maybe the Russians also. And also, I think the Rohingya voices should be heard in the UN Assembly. They should talk about, I mean, their voices should also be heard there. I mean, we cannot just give up on them. We have to have a solution. Bangladesh has its own problems. Bangladeshi people have their own problems, but we cannot also give up on the Rohingya community. It's a huge population that can become a strength, that can become actually a positive influence, positive power on in the world, in this part of the region, if we act together. So we can talk whole day, but if the main stakeholders are not questioned, if they are not accountable, everybody has their own agenda in Myanmar. Nobody is blaming the Rakhine army. No, there are sanctions given on the army, and then it's taken. The sanctions were lifted later. So they have to be accounted for. Pressure has to be there. So we know there is a Ukraine war. We know there is Palestine-Gaza war going on. There are, in the globe, there are so many crises going on. But this crime, we cannot forget about this. We have to bring people on the table. In the assembly, the Rohingya people should be there. They should be talking about themselves. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Sir.
If I understood your question correctly, you're asking what is our expectation of the forthcoming conference?
Yes, sir. So, because...
The UN conference.
Yeah. So next 13th.
Well, let me be a brutal realist. I do not really have much expectations of that conference. A lot of money will be spent. A lot of delegates will go, a lot of talks will be held. That money could well be diverted to feeding and educating the Rohingyas in the camps, because money for the camps is already drying up. The UN General Assembly resolutions to date from 1947 onwards, how many of them have been implemented? We are seeing the non-implementation of several already. What we have to do is rely more on ourselves, more on our intensive diplomacy with our neighbors, because it's the neighborhood which has to solve the problem. And I say this because I have seen this happening when I was posted in South Africa. When they were having conflicts in Central Africa, it was the South African government which took the initiative, formed an African Union force to restore peace. And it has been working. So when I talked about the UN Trusteeship Council, I'm still hoping against hope the UN will wake up, but the Security Council configuration will not allow it to function. The divisions among the superpowers today is much worse than it was when it was formed. Okay? So we have to be realists, but we have to be pragmatic. We have a problem. How do we alleviate the problem within our own lands? And for that, I think we have to intensify our diplomacy bilaterally as well as regionally. And I emphasize regionally because this is a regional problem. This will not be solved by the world. The world is going into so many crisis modes that the money and energy and time for solving all the problems has already evaporated. So I'll end there.
Thank you, sir. The same question, sir.
It is difficult to keep unflinched faith on the UN. Therefore, I don't have any new points to make. I second what my preceding speakers have said. One is about getting Rohingyas' voice directly reflected on the forum. And secondly, as Ambassador Tariq very rightly noted, it is a sub-national level problem with regional repercussions. We can use the UN platform to get a bit of a international aura, but ultimately it has to be dealt at regional level. I agree with him. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The same question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I would also underscore the very important point that our panelists from the BNP mentioned about Rohingya voices. You know, we live in an era where lived experience really matters and it really resonates. So that could really be very impactful, I think. Beyond that, you know, sometimes the obvious needs to be stated. Bangladesh's team at the UN needs to fully mobilize. Its permanent mission needs to be fully mobilized. The chief advisor needs to be fully seized of this. Presumably the chief advisor will be at UNGA. You know, if this really is the biggest challenge that Bangladesh faces, and I think it is, then you need to make it the biggest priority for the biggest platform for international debates on development and humanitarian challenges. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I must thank you to our esteemed panelists for their very thoughtful sharing. Yes, we have a frustrations because frustrations, it's about 8 years. Our problem cannot be solved. It was genocide, it was ethnic cleansing, and Myanmar should be punished for it. But we are Bangladesh, as in the position of the Bengal Delta, which we call the epicenter, and it's our hope. Our Bay of Bengal is under risks. Is definitely under risk. So I agree with our esteemed panelists that yes, even though General Assembly announced this issue reprioritize and make consensus with adjustment to the normal General Assembly every year happening. So in this 30th September, be optimistic to solve this problem in very peaceful way. Yes, again, as Ambassador Karim mentioned that rather than to think it's very globally, we must actually figure out the program very regionally. On behalf of Sasakawa Peace Foundation, I must thank you to all of my panelists for their time. It's a very short time. You know, we have to finish by 1 hour. Maybe we take the 10 minutes more. I apologize for that. In Japanese way, I must say arigato gozaimasu. And also, my friend, those who are actually organizing this event, at the very beginning, they mentioned that all are young, our young generations. They made it very, very successfully. And we are really proud to be a partner with this Bengal Delta Conference. Thank you so much. See you again.